Hey guys, it's Sagar, and in this video, we will take a very detailed look at all the cameras on this Realme 10 Pro Plus. Many people are calling these cameras a disappointment and a downgrade. So is that all true? Well, a part of it is. Earlier this year, Realme launched the Realme 9 Pro Plus, and it came with a 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 sensor as its primary camera. Now towards the end of the same year, they came out with the Realme 10 Pro Plus, and it comes with a 108 megapixel sensor, which most people might think must be an upgrade over the 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 sensor, right? But there's a catch. This 108 megapixel sensor is Samsung's HM6 sensor, which is not only significantly smaller than the Sony IMX766 sensor on the 9 Pro Plus, but it also doesn't get OIS. Not using a better image sensor was one of the areas where Realme decided to cut the cost, so they could include a curved display on this 10 Pro Plus. There are a few more corners which they cut, and to know about them, make sure to check out my unboxing and initial impressions video on this phone. So if you plan on going from the Realme 9 Pro Plus to the 10 Pro Plus, you will definitely feel the downgrade in terms of camera quality. But honestly, I don't really know many people who will be making this upgrade. Most people planning to get the Realme 10 Pro Plus might be coming from an even older phone, and chances are, their phones might have even worse set of cameras. In this video, let us try and find out how the cameras on this Realme 10 Pro Plus would be for those people. We have already seen that the main rear camera comes with a 108 megapixel Samsung HM6 sensor. It also gets f1.8 aperture and 24mm lens. The other two cameras are in this second camera module. First of which gets an 8 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture and a 16mm ultra-wide angle lens, and the second one gets a 2 megapixel sensor with f2.4 aperture and a macro lens. Another small thing before the image samples. My phone is running the latest Realme UI update, which was available at the time of uploading this video, and all these images have been shot after the said update has been installed. With that, let us head to the image and video samples, starting with the daytime shots. The main camera has a 108 megapixel sensor, but by default it captures 12 megapixel binned images, which still look really good. And in bright conditions, this camera captures a lot of details. There is a bit of sharpening in these images, but thankfully they don't look too processed or over sharp. Quite a few of my images turned out to be faded, like there was a filter applied on top of the shot. This mostly happens when bright sky is covering a significant part of the image, like in this shot. Other times it will tend to overexpose the shot, again when there is a big bright area in your image, and you will have to tap on a certain part of the image or bring the brightness slider down manually to make the images look balanced. That being said, in most of the other daytime shots which I took, I think this Realme 10 Pro Plus is a pretty decent shooter during the daytime. Once you find out a few of its quirks and the workaround to get past them, it ends up taking good looking images. Realme's image processing tries to lift the shadows a bit, so these images have less contrast in them compared to how I could see the scene with my eyes. This room was much darker in person, and because the phone tried to add a lot of light in the shadows, we also see a good amount of noise in these conditions. I think the OIS, like on the Realme 9 Pro Plus, would have been very helpful in these kind of shots. Colors from the main camera of this Realme 10 Pro Plus are a bit of a hit or miss. In some of the shots, the colors look as they were in real life, while in others, the phone adds a lot of saturation, making the images pop out. And in some of the cases like this shot, it faded the shot so much that we can't even see the green color of the leaves anymore. I agree that this scene doesn't have too many colors to begin with, but these leaves did have some amount of green color, and they were not as lifeless as they look in this shot. Other times, the colors turned out to be decent, but as I said, it's a hit or a miss type thing. You never know which of the shots will show good or true to life colors, or which of the images will be saturated or desaturated. Maybe Realme could improve this via updates in the future. 90% of the time, this phone does really well with the dynamic range. I had left the HDR mode on auto and let the phone decide when it needs to turn it on, and in most of the images, it did not disappoint me. You can see how well it did with the darker and brighter parts of this shot. There are no over or underexposed parts in the shot, so that's good. In this shot, it did blow the sun out, but we see a lot of details in the building and even in the trees. This was also one of the first shots which I took with this phone, and if I knew better, I would have manually adjusted the exposure to make it look much better. That being said, the phone still does well to make the images look good. It prioritizes darker parts of the scene, so at times the bright areas might look a bit too bright. But for most of these shots, we see some details in the bright areas, so it's not like it is completely blowing those parts away. Before we check out the close-up shots, here is a quick focusing speed test with the main camera. As you can see, it is not the fastest or smoothest at switching the focus from near to a far object, but it is good enough and it gets the job done. When the focus is set on a nearby object, the close-up shots turn out really good. Despite of it being a 108 megapixel sensor, the minimum focusing distance is really good on this phone. You can get much closer to your subject and still be able to set focus on it. Thanks to the bigger image sensor and f1.8 aperture, the background of these close-up shots get a very nice creamy bokeh. All that being said, every now and then the main camera just doesn't want to set the focus on the subject like in this shot. I tried recomposing this shot in many different ways, closed the camera app and tried again, but the camera just won't focus on these flares. I could have tapped on the flash to make it set the focus there, but then we run into a different issue. If you feel like the focus is not set properly and you tap on the area that you want to be in focus, the phone just overexposes the entire image, and because of how bright the scene becomes, it again fails to set the focus. You will then have to lower the brightness slider a lot manually for the phone to set the focus and take the image. This happens while taking videos or portrait shots too, and ends up consuming a lot of your time to take one balanced looking shot. I don't know if this is something that could be fixed via update or not, but I would really like Realme to at least try to fix it. If you want to get even closer to your subject, there is a 2 megapixel macro lens, but please don't use this lens. Here is how a 2 megapixel macro shots look, and this is how a 3x digitally zoomed in shot from the main image sensor looks like. You tell me which one looks better. I would go with the digitally zoomed in shot every single time because that shot has much more details and very little noise compared to the macro shot. I understand that digital zoom is not equivalent to a macro shot, but in this case the macro camera is so bad that this method delivers better looking results. Which of these two ways do you want to use for taking your macro shots on this phone is up to you. The third camera on the back of this phone has an ultra wide angle lens, and here is how much more of the scene it will let you capture compared to the normal lens. This lens gives us the opportunity to capture a scene from a different perspective and to show the true scale of the scene. You might notice a bit more noise, less details and slightly darker pictures from the wide lens. That's because it gets a 8 megapixel sensor as opposed to the 108 megapixel one behind the main camera. The lens optics and the aperture is also not as good as the main camera, so these wide shots don't look all that attractive or don't have the best dynamic range, especially if the light is anything less than ideal. It is a very good lens to have on your phone, but I use it very sparingly and only when the lighting conditions are very bright. If you remember, we get a 3x button on the viewfinder. We don't have a telephoto lens, so all this mode does is zooms in digitally via the main image sensor and use some software magic to make the 3x digitally zoomed in shots look good and usable. You can keep on digitally zooming in up to 20 times, but those images look like complete trash. I would say stick with 3x zoom because that is the sweet spot for digital zoom. But if you have very stable hands, you can make 5x images look good as well. Any further than that and the images look very soft and grainy. I said this at the beginning that all the images that we saw from the main camera were 12 megapixel images. If you want to capture more details, then you can switch to the 108 megapixel mode. This mode captures a ton of details, and each of these 108 megapixel image is at least 5 times larger in terms of overall size compared to the normal 12 megapixel one. If I zoom in 4 to 5 times on both these images, you can clearly see how much more details the 108 megapixel one has. I could keep on zooming in even further and we will see more details, while the 12 megapixel image is looking like a pixelated mess. So when you're capturing some landscape or architecture in bright light and you want to preserve every minute detail, then this 108 megapixel mode will come in very handy. That being said, you should also know that these large size images don't go through the same image processing pipeline as the 12 megapixel ones do. So you will see significantly reduced dynamic range, more noise and sometimes even weird looking colors in the 108 megapixel shots. To avoid all this, I would recommend you to use the 108 megapixel mode on only very bright sunny lighting conditions. For rest of your shots, it is best to stick with the default 12 megapixel mode. That brings us to the portrait mode. This is one of my favorite modes to shoot in. Whenever I have people in the shot, I switch to this mode. The edge detection for these portrait shots is not the most accurate on this Realme 10 Pro Plus. Actually, we have seen much better edge detection from older Realme phones, so I don't know what is happening here. And by default, it wants to retouch your skin. So if you don't like that, make sure to turn it off. As this phone sees a person in the shot, it tries to make the face very bright, and in that process, it ends up overexposing the entire shot. For almost all of these portrait shots, I had to tap on the subject and lower the brightness slider manually. I did not do that on this shot, and just look at how the background is all blown out and my face looks faded. So make sure you take care of this while taking portrait shots. Some portrait shots in low on artificial light turned out to be very sharp, as you can see here, but the others were somehow blurry. I have been taking images for these videos since many years, so I have very steady pair of hands, but even then, some shots turned out to be blurry. I really don't like the edge detection from this phone. Sometimes it will miss the subject, and other times there will be a hard line separating the subject from the background, which makes the portrait shot look very unnatural. And again, in some of these shots, you can see the camera did not want to focus, so the subject just appears to be very soft. I hope Realme acknowledges this problem and works on fixing it. With that, let us move on to the images which I took in artificial and lower lighting conditions. This is normally where the mid-range smartphones start falling apart. Let us see how the Realme 10 Pro Plus does in these situations. When there is plenty of artificial or ambient light, we see really good images from the main camera. Keep in mind that all of these are 12 megapixel binned images and they handle the noise better. These are low light shots, but they are still pretty well lit, and that helps the bigger sensor capture enough light and details for these images to look as good as they do. As long as you don't have people in the shot, they turn out good. But if you have people in your shot, the phone will just try to blow their faces and in the process again overexpose the entire shot. This is sad, but this camera performs really well unless you have people in your shot. As you get to even lower light, the images still look good, but the lack of OIS starts making its images look a bit softer. And in all of the shots, you also get to see the faded foggy look. I'm sure most people won't like it, but it seems to be here to stay. If you want a bit sharper looking shots, you will have to either switch to the night mode or have the auto night mode turned on from within the settings. While the night mode shots do have more light and details in them, just look at how the gloomy effect from the lights is also amplified. No matter how far or small the light source is, this phone will somehow find a way to make the image look faded because of it. I'm not a big fan of this, and that is the reason I did not take too many images with it once the light got this low. The wide lens also gets night mode, and honestly, even with it turned on, these images look like trash. I don't think anyone should be using this lens in anything less than ideal light. I'm not going to say anything more, just look at these images and decide for yourself. That brings us to the front-facing camera. The 16 megapixel selfie camera is nothing out of the ordinary. It takes good looking images and gets the job done. If you want sharp selfies, make sure you have the beauty or skin smoothing mode turned off. You will also need to have a bit steady pair of hands, as even the slightest movement might result in a blurry looking shot even during the daytime. For some reason, even when I had the HDR mode turned on, the background is almost always blown away in these selfies. Surprisingly, the edge detection is really accurate while taking portrait selfies. It is much better and even faster than while taking portraits with a real camera. Even though it's a 16 megapixel selfie camera, the selfies don't look as sharp as you would expect, and the beauty mode is on by default, so for slightly more details in your portrait shots, make sure to turn it off. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the Realme 10 Pro Plus. You can see how this camera is handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure, and stabilization when I'm walking around with it. It gets a 16 megapixel selfie camera with f2.5 aperture, and it can shoot at a maximum resolution of 1080p 30 fps. There is a lot of traffic near me, so you guys can let me know in the comments how do you think this phone is handling my voice. The main camera can shoot at a maximum resolution of 4K 30 fps. These videos have details in them, but there is no stabilization, which makes them look extremely unstable and frankly jarring to look at. No matter how steady pair of hands you have, these 4K videos will look really bad if you walk even a bit with the phone. You can take good looking 4K videos with this phone if you just hold the phone steady and don't move at all, like I did in this shot. 1080p videos get some sort of stabilization, but then you lose out on the crispiness of the 4K resolution. There is also a super steady video mode which makes the videos rock solid, but it is locked at 1080p 60 fps. I wish this mode was available for 4K videos. Here is 4K unstabilized video and ultra steady 1080p video compared side by side. If you like to take videos, I would say look at some of the other phones in this price range. What is the use of having 4K video ability if you can't even use those videos? With that, we have seen over 110 image and video samples from all the cameras on this phone. I'm just going to say this and get it out of the way. Leaving the main camera aside, the other cameras on this phone are just not good enough. The main camera, however, performs really well during the daytime. There are a few issues like the tendency to overexpose and not being able to focus at times, but I think once you learn to look past it or learn to work past it, this camera does really well. I am however not happy with the portrait mode performance, and I wish it was much better. The low light performance when there is some amount of light around is really good. Actually, surprisingly good. But then when you get to even lower light, its performance just drops down. Also for me, the video performance of this phone is just not good. Yes, this phone is a downgrade compared to the Realme 9 Pro Plus in terms of cameras, mainly because of lack of the OIS on the main camera. That being said, I feel this Realme 10 Pro Plus is a decent camera phone if most of your images are shot during the daytime or in artificially lit areas. So that's it from my side. You guys saw all the images too, so what do you guys think about the cameras on this phone? Let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to our channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.